Sorry, apologize. So I call to the order the Oswego Community Unit School District 308 Board of Education meeting. Can I get a roll call?
Mrs. Doyle.
Present.
Mr. Gatewood.
Present.
Mrs. Johnson.
Present.
Mrs. Kroner. Dr. Marino.
Present.
Mrs. Simulton.
Present.
Mrs. Swanson.
Present.
Agenda item 3.2, Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. 4.1, opportunity for the public to address the Board of Education. On behalf of the Board of Education, I would like to thank the public for attending tonight's meeting. We value the feedback we receive from our residents and encourage everyone to take an active interest in their public school system. Residents interested in speaking to the board this evening are asked to have completed a comment card and presented it to the secretary to the board. When the secretary calls your name, I ask that you come to the microphone, state your name for the public record, and provide your feedback. Please note that comments are limited to 5 minutes per person, and that only 3 comments per topic will be heard. No discussion of personnel matters or responses to questions are permitted. The board does not participate in discussion during public comment. Follow-up to your questions or concerns will be addressed by administration through the contact information provided on the comment card.
Crystal Casper.
Could you put your mask up over your nose, please?
I can't see that. I can't see my glasses and I can't read.
It is a rule in the schools. Thank you.
My name is Crystal Casper. I'm speaking on behalf of the Community in Action Group. I have been in contact with Faith that felt this issue needed to be addressed publicly as it's a concern for many members of the Community in Action Group. My email was asking for a specific instructional material that is being...
Can you speak into the microphone, please?
My email was asking for specific instructional material that is being given to teachers on how to incorporate CRT into the curriculum. The response was that there were no standards that are being taught to students on CRT. It is the teachers that are being trained on best practices and instruction to meet the needs of the students. I'm referring to the culturally responsive teaching, that's what you guys call it. She had attached some slides for reference. I will be speaking to Faith hopefully this week regarding the email response I sent to her, but I'm going to read you what my response was. Seeing as there are no standards being taught, I would be very interested in what training actually means, and more specifically, what it will look and feel like in a class setting. What are teachers being encouraged, coerced, or forced into doing? Examples for each point on your slides would give better understanding and not just gloss over or leave room for interpretation. Were there training sessions that took place in person or over Zoom? Are parents able to gain access to those meetings if they are over Zoom? Will there be future training, and if so, can parents be involved? What is the overall goal of School District 308 wishes to accomplish with these new programs? How can the DEI and SEL departments give parents more insight and open forums to discuss issues in opposition with these new ideological trainings that may not align with their own worldviews? If teachers do not agree with CRT agenda, are they given the ability to opt out? Are parents given the ability to opt their children out of these learning sessions, or will it be intertwined in all lesson plans, ceasing any way to avoid it? Is there oversight on how the material is being infused into the classroom? Will parents be given the opportunity to review all the lesson plans in advance so they can determine whether they are appropriate or not? Policy states opportunity for all students, so if parents do not wish to have their children exposed to certain material, there should be options available. The public school system leaves much to be desired and little control to the people that matter most, the children and the taxpayer. We want our kids to be able to enjoy a few years of childhood untouched, unscathed, or manipulated by the government. We want to preserve their innocence and encourage free flow of thoughts and opinions without being subject to scrutiny or criticism. It's abundantly clear the public school system's objective is the exact opposite. They want one view, equal outcomes, and total compliance. While trying to create this utopia of acceptance and love, they are pushing kids to become combative, aggressive, cynical, and overly dramatic about their feelings at any given moment. You are essentially creating victims and enemies in K through 12. With civil unrest on the rise, does it make sense to encourage activism, angst, and identity politics on our youth? This will only produce more anger, vengeance, and hatred among us all. Our kids deserve a good education based on facts, figures, distinguished literature, not on opinions, feelings, and political agendas. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Jennifer Clark.
Good evening, my name is Jennifer Clark and I have 3 students in the district. I am against requiring our kids to wear masks next year. Masks don't work. Even the beloved Dr. Fauci stated in an email that masks are really for infected people to prevent them from spreading the infection to people who are not infected, rather than protecting uninfected people from acquiring the infection. He also states that the typical mask you buy in the drugstore, the kind all our kids are wearing, is not really effective in keeping out the virus, which is small enough to pass through the material. I know the pro-mask argument has been that we all need to wear masks because we don't know who is asymptomatic and that they could spread the virus to everyone they come in contact with. However, we are now learning, again from Dr. Fauci's emails, and Dr. Ascowie, who testified before a congressional committee, that asymptomatic spread is very rare and is not the predominant method of spreading COVID. We've known from the beginning that children are the least vulnerable population, and if they do catch it, they have a 99.997% chance of survival. And yet we force them to mask up for what? We know they will recover from the virus, but will they recover from wearing the mask? There is more and more scientific evidence mounting that COVID protocols are causing extreme emotional, psychological, and physical harm, particularly in young children who are vulnerable and going through important developmental changes. Specifically, wearing a mask has caused fatigue, headaches, decline in cognitive performance, a disposition for viral and infectious illnesses, anxiety, depression. Masks are dehumanizing. They erase our facial expressions and discourage communication. Children need to see what adults and other kids are feeling. Part of socialization comes from reading and interpreting the facial expressions of others. Academically, how can children in a regular classroom learn speech nuances and letter sounds without being able to observe the movement of lips and emotion in the face? We are delaying our children's learning abilities when it comes to reading. We can see the negative impacts masks are having on developmental issues. But what is happening inside each child emotionally? Our children are being isolated and they feel alone. Over the last 6 months, I've seen my own children hide behind the mask. They've become less social and more withdrawn because they are no longer able to socialize with their friends at school. They can't work on those lifelong skills of making new friends and starting conversations with people because they feel like they're being withheld behind this mask. My junior high son said that towards the end of the school year, kids should stop going to in-person learning because there wasn't any point. No one could talk to each other, you had to sit so many feet apart, and you had to be on your Chromebook anyway during class. They just stopped going because they weren't getting that social aspect of attending school. This must change. Masks are not healthy and they create undue anxiety and stress. Kids wearing masks for 6 hours a day, breathing the same air constantly, touching their mask, causing bacteria and germs to form on the mask, and then repeatedly breathing those germs back into their bodies. The face masks are also causing skin irritations and bacterial infections around the nose and mouth. How is this healthy for our children? Not to mention the fear that we are instilling in our children, thinking the air they breathe is deadly, or the fear that getting in trouble for not having their mask on correctly. I know the default approach of this school board is to follow the ISBE's lead, which looks to the CDC for health recommendations. But the CDC's guidance is just that, guidance, it's not law. We elect you to represent us and do what is in the best interest of our children, not the ISBE. Please put parents back in the driver's seat for their children's health by returning our schools to normal. No masks and minimal to no social distancing. I know it's possible. Other school districts across the country are removing the mask mandate and are returning to normal. Let adults protect themselves as they see fit, and let parents decide whether a mask is appropriate for their children. If someone wants to wear a mask, great, they can wear a mask, but it should not be a mandate for all children. Also, I hope you are not considering requiring students who are not vaccinated to continue to wear masks, while those that are vaccinated do not have to wear masks. To segregate students based on vaccination status is just another way to cause division and insecurity in our kids. The elementary kids might not think much of it, but believe me, it'll be a big deal in junior high and high school. Some kids cannot receive the vaccine for medical reasons, and by requiring them to wear masks, you are putting a big sign on them that singles them out from their peers. I'm sure there are a lot of kids that can handle being different, but there will be some students that cannot, and it will have emotional consequences like depression, isolation, or worse, as if something is wrong with them. So again, please let the parents decide whether a mask is appropriate for their children or not. They should not be mandated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Katie Hayden.
Hello, my name is Katie Hayden. Thank you again for being here and listening. So I just have a few things to go over on a different note, of course. I come to you today because I'm concerned about your use with ESSER funds, and I wanted to bring up some things for you to look over and investigate. At the last meeting, Lori Doyle asked if we could do more for our students by not using these funds for capital fund means or deferred maintenance. I understand that District 308 has had issues with HVAC in the past, and I understand the need. But Ruth Croner also echoed her concerns about spelling and SD308 being reliant on technology. Faith brought up her concern and attempts to tackle SD308's ELA concerns. So thank you, I appreciate that. And Ms. Swanson also brought up special education testing for eyewear for students who struggle with ELA. I feel the board has some really great ideas and great motivations moving forward. But my question is, why in the ESSER funds plan is there no mention of a resource coordinator or even on your employment opportunities page for SD308? Maybe it's labeled as something differently, maybe an interventionist, maybe I'm missing it. But in Chapter 5, I'm referring to the Illinois P20 Chapter 5 Learning Renewal Resource Guide. It talks about different ways to allocate funds with the ESSER 1, 2, and 3. It talks about some of the things that were hot topics during this election in 2020 and 2021. Also to mention that SD308 Envision plan. I don't see some of the things that were mentioned in that plan anywhere on the ESSER funds. It talks about creating self-sustaining programs, mentorship, community volunteers, and different resources for our students. These students need this. They've been impacted by COVID-19, and we even had these struggles before this. And not to mention, which I know you've all heard it before, college remediation rates at District 308 are 49%. Whether we want to admit it or not, that's half of the student population that's not ready for community college. And the Pell Grant only covers between 30 to 45 non-credit hours. I know what a real financial burden is having to pay college tuition rates for courses that they were in high school when they weren't approaching their goals. That is a true financial burden. And that will be a financial burden to 50% of SD308's student population moving forward after their senior year. If we really want to help the students impacted by COVID-19 and our struggles prior, we should be setting them up for success by having interventionists that could help them on their way to transitioning to community college. So I ask you to please investigate that if you can in your allocation of ESSER funds. because having a 49% college remediation rate does not set them up for success for a prevailing wage in society as a successful citizen. And did you know, just a little interesting fact, that the City of Chicago Schools District 299, their college remediation rate is 59%. We're 10% away from being in the category as an inner city school. That's our reality right now. And just because we live in Oswego does not mean we can take on or not try programs that inner city schools do to help their kids who are struggling in regular public education curriculum. I ask you today to please review Chapter 5 in the P20, what is it? I gotta go back to the first page. P20 Council Learning Renewal Resource Guide. And I ask you, as our society becomes more open to different means of education, let it be known, as we've been talking about different things, that intellectual discrimination is real, and it is out there. My family and my ancestors have experienced it, and it impacts our youth education and our workforce. And that outgrowing disabilities as we become an adult does not happen. We as adults learn coping mechanisms. So I ask you today to consider the fact, hang on, I lost myself, to consider these things because it's prevalent that 49% of our student body could be intellectually discriminated, not only in their education, but in their workforce, fighting for a prevailing wage. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that all? Okay. All right, so we're going to move to 5.1, board member comments.
I just wanted to say that participating in graduation as a board member was something that I didn't know I was going to be able to do, and was such a joy to be able to do after the year we've had in COVID. It was just amazing to be able to look at the faces of our youth. I saw that day potential, possibility, relief, joy, anticipation, and hope. And after the year that we've had, it was something that definitely was proud to see, and I look forward to what our students go off to do, both in their careers, their trades, and whether it's starting a family. So I just wanted to say that thank you for the opportunity to do so.
I echo that. When you get elected to the board, there's so many implications to being a board member, and sometimes you don't realize what they are, but it was such a thrill to be at graduation, to be able to hand the students their diploma jackets, and got so many calls from parents and text messages saying how excited they were that we were able to do that. Being a employee of the district for 11 years, I know a lot of students, and so I was just overjoyed to be able to have that opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, I would also say that being our first graduation as new board members, it was very special, and having the opportunity to hand out the diplomas was just amazing to see each child's face. Another thing I'd just like to say is that I've started meeting one-on-one with some of our directors, and today met with our SEL director and elementary and junior high, and just feel very grateful for how passionate they all are about serving our community, and what a great example of administration they are. And finally, just as June is Pride Month, I wanted to recognize all of our LGBTQ+ students and staff. And as many of you know, when I started this journey, I promised to be an advocate for all of our students. And just wanted to say to our LGBTQ+ students and staff that I do see you, and I do accept you and support you, and just want you to know that you do have an advocate in me, and just wish you a happy Pride Month. So. So thank you. All right. Any other board member comments? No. Okay. Sorry. Okay, so 5.2, board committee reports. I know we have teaching and learning.
Sure, it's a great opportunity to sit in on that meeting, and I won't steal the thunder from the presentation later on, but it was the proposed high school graduation requirements, and it's exciting to hear that the graduation requirements consist of 6 different departments, and they will be changing, or there were changes that are being recommended for science, for driver's education, the electives, and the computer literacy will be embedded within several of those. And so it's just exciting to me because the recommended changes will give greater opportunity for the students and flexibility so that they can take classes in which they are interested in versus being limited based on how the electives and certain classes are categorized right now. So I'm excited to hear, we're excited for everyone to hear more about the presentation later today.
Eugene and I had a good time hanging out with you for a day.
It was awesome.
But thank you for listening, and to all of the administrators and the teachers and the building reps who were part of those conversations. Just thank you.
It was
It's been a
awesome.
long time coming, some of those.
Great job.
Yeah.
All right, items 5.3 is the superintendent's report. So good evening, board. I won't say a whole lot more about graduation other than we graduated over 1,400 seniors on May 22nd at Northern Illinois University. It was a hot day, but it was a great day to bring all of our 308 kids back together as a graduating class of 2021 before departing 308. Since we just finished the end of the school year, I have a variety of highlights that I wanted to share with you. The high school principals informed me that the class of 2021 as a combined graduating class earned a total of almost $19 million in scholarship money. So yes, $19 million. So congratulations to all of the seniors who just graduated on all their hard work. That's quite the accomplishment. This past couple of weeks, we've had quite a wonderful couple of weeks athletically here across the school district. Congratulations to the OHS boys baseball team for winning the conference for the first time in 18 years. That was a big accomplishment for them, so congratulations to those guys. Also, congratulations to the following OHS girls who qualified for the state track tournament that will be held at Eastern Illinois University this weekend. The 4x4 relay, Becca Corbett, Grace Davis, Emma Ponks, and Ella Hale, with alternates Sophia Marasco and Janelle East qualified in the 4x4 relay. Emma Ponks qualified in the pole vault. Audra Sutherland qualified in the 3200, and Becca Corbett in the 800. Also, congratulations to the Oswego East girls soccer team, the Oswego East boys tennis team, the Oswego East girls track team, and all winning the Southwest Prairie Conference titles this season. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, how many teams and how many sports and how many individual athletes did I just name there? And then finally, congratulations to the OE girls softball team on winning the regionals last week. So a lot of good things happening there. So on a separate note, I'm also very happy to announce that, you know, a couple meetings ago, we were talking about junior high athletics and activities and clubs for next year. We will have junior high activities, clubs, sports, and things next year. And we will also be implementing activity buses for students. So when they stay after school to get extra work, both for academics, tutoring, stay after for clubs, activities, there is a way for them to get home as we transition back to in-person learning. So again, it feels very good to have so many positive things to report this evening, and that is my report.
Oswego Wrestling is still in the hunt, too.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
Item 6, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I make a motion to approve all items under consent, including 6.1 minutes from the May 10th, 2021 Board of Education meeting, open and closed session, 6.2 to acknowledge the FOIA request received by the district, 6.3 the acceptance of the gifts and or donations received by the district in fiscal year 2021, and 6.4 to approve the resolution to appoint Dr. John Petsky as treasurer as of July 1st, 2021, and to approve a resolution fixing the amount of bond at $15 million.
Second.
Mrs. Simulton,
Oh, sorry. Yes. Aye.
Dr. Marino,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson.
Aye.
So motion passes 6-0.
Mhm.
Just move to information.
Yes, item 7.1 is financial statements. Does the board have any questions in regards to the financial statements that have been provided this evening? All right, moving on, item 7.2 is a resolution for early redemption of taxable educational purposes tax anticipation warrants. So item 7.2 is an informational item regarding the early redemption of the $25 million in tax anticipation warrants. When the TAWs were issued in February, we were hopeful, but not certain that the district would be able to pay them back by June 20th. So a maturity date of July 31st, 2021 was chosen. However, an option of paying back the TAWs early was included to maximize the district's options. And as a result of the state paying our quarterly MCATs on time, the outlook of cash flow is higher than anticipated in the past. So therefore, the district can choose the early redemption date option of June 28th to save $17,416 in interest. We'll bring this item back for approval on June 26th. Are there any questions regarding this informational item this evening? All right, item 7.3. Item 7.3 is in regards to the start times for the Board of Education public sessions starting on July 13th. Our current start time is 7:30. I believe the board would like to change that start time to 7:15. Is there any discussion that needs to take place on this item, because we do have this for approval later in the agenda? Okay. Hearing none, if you could, item 7.4 are the equity belief statements. If we could bring that presentation up, please. Item 7.4 is an informational report in regards to the work that was completed by the Board of Education Equity Advisory Committee this past year. The information being presented this evening are recommendations on equity statements provided by the committee. As the board listens to, thinks about, and engages in dialogue, it's important to note that you can accept the statements as they are written, you can modify them, or you can send them back to the committee with directions on any revisions that you would like to see. These statements reflect the vision of diversity, equity, inclusion to which SD308 aspires to. These statements will be used to guide and monitor the work in the SD308 classroom and school and district levels. The Equity Committee was comprised of a large number of committee members, and their names are listed on the slides up on the PowerPoint presentation. So we would like to thank all of the members of the committee for their time, their dedication, and their hard work on this committee. The committee had its first meeting on October 21st, 2020, and the fifth meeting and final meeting on May 5th. The committee came up with 9 equity statements that are being shared with the board this evening. The equity statements can be thought of as belief statements in regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We will now go over the 9 areas the committee focused on, which include an equity statement for each of the areas.
The first one that we talked about was curriculum, and we believe that delivering relevant and effective curriculum and instruction that is responsive to the needs of all students, including those from marginalized identities, is critical. When we talk about marginalized identities, some of the examples are our special education population, students from different races, LGBTQ+, our English learners, sometimes even by gender or by low income or by their culture. And what we mean by this is choosing materials that reflect diversity and also choosing instructional practices that ensure all of our students feel included and can be successful. If you look at the next two slides, this first one is about marginalized identities, and we acknowledge that there is biases and inequities of marginalized identities in our schools and our community, and we will not remain silent and will actively speak out and address injustices, dismantle structures that lead to inequities, and work to educate and change behaviors to ensure an inclusive and equitable school community for people of all identities. And the committee felt strongly enough specifically about racism that we created a separate belief statement that included just in race. If you think about what our country and nation had gone through at this point in time, and we're reacting to a lot of our students that we have been listening to, the idea of actually calling out racism as one of the pieces, the committee felt very strongly about that. So there's verbiage from these two slides that are exactly the same, but one is specifically about racism. We then looked at the recruitment and retention of staff, and we want to prioritize the recruitment, retention, and advancement of administrators and staff with diverse backgrounds. The committee felt it's very critical to have staff that represents different backgrounds of all of our students that attend our schools. Student voice was one of the very critical things that we discussed, and we want to empower student voices as a critical tool to create this inclusive and socially just school community. And in my experiences, this is the most powerful tool that we have to create this. It's by connecting with one another that we learn each other's stories, backgrounds, and we learn the impact of our actions on others. And this piece was very critical to the committee. Then professional development, we need to engage in ongoing equity-centered professional learning, and that includes internal and external reflection. This next piece, while very global in this statement, this is included partly because of the Climate for Learning framework that we have. We want to provide a physical, intellectual, cultural, and social emotional safe place for students and staff to learn. And this would involve implementing our Climate for Learning framework and going along with all of those pieces that need to be in place in order to do that. We also want to look at policy and embed equitable structures in the school system's policies, practices, and procedures. And finally, the committee felt very strongly that we need to partner with community groups to do this work. We need to enlist community groups to promote the academic and social emotional success of all students, not only in the partnership with the work, but their partnership in giving us feedback on how that we are doing. So this is an informational item. We'll be bringing this back later on. But if we are approved, we want to incorporate these belief statements into the threads of our strategic plan and then create action steps for each of the 5 years of the strategic plan so that we can better realize and move toward these belief statements. At this time, we can address questions.
I don't have a question, but I have more of a statement. I had the opportunity prior to being elected to the board to sit on one of those, the meetings where these statements were being devised, and just, I appreciated the critical thought and the diversity of the team that was on the call, and even the sensitivity to and even the debate that happened as the team was articulating and going back and forth about language, specific words. And I just appreciated the sensitivity that they had, and to see the final document, I appreciate all the work that went into that. And I was only on a couple calls, and I mean, they were hours long, and so I just wanted to acknowledge and thank the team for the effort they put in.
Yeah, I'd like to also include the DEI Committee, which is about 60 community members who were also a part of that process, that then fed up into the Equity Board Advisory Committee. So thank the DEI Committee as well for their work in the process.
Guys, as you're talking about the debate, I have a question on slides 5 and 6.
Sure.
So on slide 5, So we will deliver relevant and effective curriculum and instruction that is responsive to the needs of all students. So personally, I would stop there. Like, I understand where they were going with the from marginalized, but I think that it kind of contradicts the next slide, which talks about we acknowledge the existence of racism. So are we specifically going after racism, or are we going after bias? And are we talking about all kids or just some particular groups of kids? I guess for me, those, you know what I mean? Like, for me, I wanna be responsive to the needs of all students, right? And I understand, like, so I guess my question is around the debate on these two, right? So in one, it seems like we're going for marginalized identities. So I think marginalized identities, I'm thinking, you know, the kids who are hard of hearing, the kids who are severely, you know, have some pretty severe, you know, in some of our programs. And then I get to the next slide and I'm like, well, wait a minute, what was I interpreting that wrong? So I guess my question is more around maybe the debate between verbiage and where the thought is between bias and racism.
I can offer insight. We had a debate around that very certain piece of adding on whether we want to say including those from marginalized identities or stopping it at all students. And that was a discussion that the committee had, because is it enough to say all students? And the impetus behind that was, as listening to students and parents tell their stories, they really wanted these belief statements to reach out to those children and make sure that they understood that it's including those marginalized identities. And that's why we landed, although it was a long discussion, about whether that needed to be included. And eventually, I believe the group came to, there's no harm done by saying including those from marginalized identities to weigh out what might have been overlooked by just all students.
All right, and then my second question is more of a lawyer question on slide 6. And I had asked previously if the statement, we acknowledge the existence of racism in our schools and our community, opens us up for any legal ramifications, because I know there's a lot of schools that are heading this way, but I don't know that a lot of them are actually putting it in writing. So I guess from a district perspective, what does that do?
Yeah, thanks for the question. From a strictly legal lens, that first sentence could be problematic because it could be perceived as an admission of racism that could be used against the district. So I think the rest of that slide is fine, and certainly you can say something about we acknowledge the existence of racism in our society, we condemn racism wherever it is found, but just the way that's worded, I would recommend wordsmithing.
If we swap it out for bias, is that still? Well, I guess it could still be. Never mind. That was a terrible question. And then my next one's on, we'll come back to that. We'll let you wordsmith it. That's why we pay you the big bucks, right? And then number 8, recruitment and retention of staff. Again, like I think the problem with staff and staff not being representative of our student body is a bigger issue than just, I want to hire the best person for the job, no matter what race, gender, sexual orientation, I don't care. I want to hire the best person for the job. I think to address this slide, it goes down to slide 13. So if you go down to slide 13, we talked about partnerships, right? And I think if you want to address the needs of getting some people into the buildings, to be in the buildings and teaching in the buildings and being more representative of our community, you have to get into the high schools and you have to get these kids when they're deciding to go to college, right? I mean, we have DECA at, we have Future Educators of America. We have a couple different programs where I teach at, and I think we have some similar things at our high schools, but I think that there could be a bigger push, maybe, even with some outside groups to maybe get some of these kids in, you know, maybe do some observation hours, maybe as part of, a 2-hour block, and let's go down to the grade school that's closest to us and see if that's something that we really want to do in life. Because I think the way that you fix this problem is to get more people involved in education, which I think kind of lends itself to the community partnerships, but I really struggle with slide 8, and that I want the best person for the job.
And I believe that the committee does also want the best person for the job, but in meeting with, and I've had the opportunity to meet with small groups of administrators of color from our district and find out some of the obstacles this year, and some of the things that they have experienced. And I do believe there is room for improvement to help retain some of the great candidates of diverse backgrounds that we have. Also to, during the interview process or even the selection process, get more advertising and have more of a building our rapport and our reputation to draw in candidates from diverse backgrounds. I don't think anyone is talking about or promoting, at least my perception, it's dangerous when I speak for an entire committee of people, that we would not continue to hire the best people for the job, but we're wanting to make sure that we have, we're recruiting and retaining some of our populations that our students don't see very often. I even used, which you don't really think of, as being from diverse backgrounds, but even at the elementary level, be sure great to have a few more male teachers. And so it's not just about race it's about looking at your team and how do we have a lot of diversity within that team to represent and to embrace the students and the families that we all represent.
So I wonder if that one is a matter of tweaking the language. Because I think the lay average person reading that is going to make the same assumption, if you want to call it that Ally is, but talking about recruitment, it does say recruitment, retention, and advancement.
I think we could maybe just add a little bit more to it.
Do you have a suggestion?
I would almost say that, if you're looking for the best person for the job, and what the goal is to prioritize all of these pieces to give students what they need. And in order to be the best person for the job, you have to, in some way, shape, or form, reflect these students' backgrounds and needs. Doesn't that kind of fit into not just prioritizing recruitment, retention, but maybe even more that we believe that the recruitment, retention, and advancement of administrators and staff with diverse backgrounds is important to provide this to our students.
I'd like to jump in here. This happens to be my background. So what I think, where I see where Allie's coming from, because when you read it for what it's worth, it reads that way. But what I think a lot of people don't understand from an HR perspective is when you're recruiting, especially in education, we recruit from very specific schools because they happen to have education programs. And what we need to start focusing on is other colleges beyond the NIUs of the world, the Judsons of the world, where we see a lot of Aurora universities, where we see a lot of those candidates from. We need to expand our recruitment efforts. We need to go to job fairs where there are more diverse candidates. And I think that it's more of a systemic thing versus a candidate of color versus a Caucasian candidate. I think this is more systemic, but I don't think that's the way that slide reads.
I think, to Faith's point, I think we do need more men at the grade schools. I think in all 3 of my kids, in how many years of grade school, we had one. So, to me, we could maybe tweak that a little bit to maybe, I don't really know how I want to tweak that, but I think I want to add a little something more to it.
To reflect our students.
Well, I think it's the word prioritize that is throwing people off, like by
Well, but
prioritizing, it sounds like it's,
No,
Right, I think
No.
we should
Diverse.
prioritize the retention of staff across the board. I mean, across the board. I think, but,
I think it's equalizing the opportunity. That's what we're
ooh, that's
trying to do.
Now, you can see what 20-plus people did over about 10 hours of work, and this is what they came up with. So it's a difficult process.
It was, and to Eugene's point, I was able to sit in on some of those meetings as well. And when you see that sheer volume of people that were on the invitation, I thought this is going to be a disaster. It was phenomenal. They did really great work. But
Absolutely.
it was round and round on this stuff. And when they're in that group, they come to consensus. And then other people are looking at it going, wait a second, that doesn't make sense to us. So, but I agree with Ally. I don't think that slide reads the way that it was intended, not we, but that the group intended.
Latanya, you were part of that group. What was the?
I mean, this was months in the making, right?
Yeah.
And I think that statement speaks to where I think we want to go. I know when people read things and it says diverse, you know, I'm always hesitant to try to change the discourse, because I think that to say, you know, it's always about the, you know, we want to hire the most qualified candidate, or, you know, qualified can be a very subjective word. You know, we want quality candidates, and sometimes we associate these words diverse with, you know, a lack of quality or a lack of being qualified. And if you go into an interview process and anyone who sits in front of you is qualified, everyone there is, they won't pass the marks if they're not qualified. So then what do we look at after that? It's the quality. It's what is it that we are looking for in a candidate. And if that means we want more male candidates, then that's what we want. And it's not, you know, people want to talk about, well, isn't that discriminating? No, it's what we want as an organization. We want more male teachers, and we're going to go and hire them. And so, yes, we want to prioritize recruitment, retention, and advancement of administrators and staff with diverse backgrounds. I mean, I'm biased, you guys. I was sitting in those rooms for hours and hours. So, you know, there was a lot of eyes on this stuff for months, and so I like it, but I'm just one voice.
The one last perspective that I would give is actually expounding on a point that Faith said. And I think when you look at the team, so instead of looking at the candidates, when you're thinking about diverse backgrounds, you think about the team or the school or the district and what that environment needs. And if the environment is a diverse environment, and then we know that we're not just talking about academics, because when we talk about teaching the kids, it's more than just about academics. And we know, statistically speaking and realistically, how kids learn and develop, especially when it's someone that they can relate to and that they can see themselves in, that they can aspire and imagine themselves to be one day. It matters. And so I think that if we raise our consciousness when we're thinking about not just what diverse means, but what do our kids need to the environment in which they'll be learning in, then I think that we can reimagine what we need in each of those environments so that our kids have what they need in order to continue to grow and develop.
That's kind of what I
Actually,
feel like, yeah, that's a far more eloquent way to say what I'm kind of thinking about, which is that what the, as Ally said, the best person for the job will be what the team needs. It'll be maybe not just that, it's not prioritizing who the staff member is so much as it's prioritizing representing our students in a way that's more realistic to the people that make up our student body, be it gender, be it color, be it religion, whichever are allowed to be used, but that's kind of the point. That's the team. It's not who's got the most academic marks, who's got the highest GPA. It's not just who will fit in best with the team and be able to get together for coffee going in together. It might be a little uncomfortable for a team to have somebody different. But it's what better reflects the needs of our kids.
But that doesn't, that says that to me. What you just said, oh, sorry, that says exactly what you just said. That's what that says.
I guess I would like to add, George, to meet the, I don't remember how you stated it. We'd have to replay that tape.
Yeah.
I got a
Did
possibility.
you?
I got a possibility. We will prioritize the recruitment, retention, and advancement of administrators and staff with diverse backgrounds to ensure our team of educators represents our student body.
Perfect.
There you go.
Yes, that's what I meant to say.
That brought together.
No.
Yeah.
I see for me, and I'm really struggling with this, this is putting it on the candidates and the whoever we're hiring versus the process. I have a problem with putting the onus of the work on the candidate coming in versus our process, which we can affect. What we will prioritize is that we will have recruitment, retention, and HR policies in place that will, lift up these roles. But putting it on the people that are coming in is a problem for me because it's not their problem. It's our issue. It's what can we affect? Yeah. Does that make sense?
It does, but to me, that's the execution of that.
Right.
Right.
Because that's not putting the onus on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the execution. We just have to ensure that the pools that we're going to recruit the people from is based on what
Yes.
you said. But that statement, we still will prioritize it. And if the pools in which we are recruiting from does not contain the diverse backgrounds that we
Right.
need in order for our school, our students, and our district, then we have to do more work to expand the pools that we're pulling from so that we can get the candidates that we need.
To LaTanya's point,
Exactly.
the candidates are qualified.
Exactly.
So it's our process. So
Exactly.
that's where,
That's our process.
yeah.
Exactly.
And not just the pools, but also the.
Can you talk in
Not just the pools, but also the decision-making teams. What is their, what are they reflective of in terms of their demographics and their diversity and their understanding of what it is that is needed and their abilities to see through those equity lenses, critical lenses, et cetera.
So the word selection is not up there then? Because if you don't have a group of people who are aiding in the selection process that may not understand or respect, or I'll say understand, not respect, the diverse backgrounds that are needed, then the selection, if the selection process does not also have the diverse backgrounds represented, it still may be missed unconsciously.
Right, so isn't that still a part of the process, like making sure that HR or whomever the decision-making teams are, that they're reflective of what's needed?
It is, it's just the word selection is not, if I'm recruiting, I'm not necessarily in the room selecting the people who are being hired. So I'm just saying,
Add that.
So
Yeah, we're just adding selection.
Recruitment,
Okay.
selection,
Duly noted.
retention, and advancement.
So what about
Yeah.
that last part that you had on there, Faith? Do we
So,
wanna add that, or-
as it is written in my handwriting right now, we will prioritize the recruitment, selection, retention, and advancement of administrators and staff with diverse backgrounds to ensure our team of educators represents our student body.
Yes.
Great.
I like that.
Love it.
I like it a lot.
Very good. That was a good process, the way we just went through right there.
It was.
It really was.
It
So,
was.
no, we have 9 statements, and we mentioned a couple others. So what other ones need to be, or does the board feel need to be wordsmithed or changed?
I'd like to add in here, we do talk a lot about the marginalized identities. I do feel that I want to make sure that we're distinguishing between marginalized identities and marginalized systems of belief. For example, at home, one of the unfortunate realities is that we can't all agree on what is marginalized. What does that mean? And what my concern is, particularly in an area of just how a family chooses to particularly qualify LGBTQ+. In some families, they feel that is, and I'll be the one to say that some families feel that this is not something that children should be exposed to. This is part of our student body as well. So how do we maintain a safe learning environment for all children? And how can we address in there that some families have a fundamental, it's not as simple as religion or race. It's sometimes a family basis. And what do we mean when we talk about that? I want our LGBTQ+ students to feel safe and included and seen. I want our students of color, I want our students of a variety, all of our religious backgrounds, to be able to be seen. But I don't want to trample on another group's beliefs as well, because to prioritize one over the other is how are we maintaining that even for families that feel that this is not, do you know what I'm saying? I have to say this is part of our community. How do we act in a way that respects all religious beliefs and keeps out political beliefs?
I think that was the whole purpose of this exercise. I mean, I hate to really state the obvious, but these are the people that haven't been seen.
Right.
And the whole purpose of this exercise was to show them that they are seen. These students that have never been seen before because of the generalized way that education has taken place. So I like to use and talk about the deaf and hard of hearing because I'm part of that community, and I know that they've struggled here in Oswego, and never before have I heard it talked about until the last 2 years. So it's about seeing people and identities and communities that have never before been seen. And so I guess that's the purpose of this exercise. If you don't agree with that, I respect that and I understand that. You wouldn't join that club or you wouldn't be a part of whatever is being fought for, and that's fair.
So I get what,
I don't think we're trying to go against anyone's religious or family beliefs, but to create a safe environment for all kids regardless of,
right.
you know.
Or well,
So
along that
I'm hearing
lines-
people come to public comment and have concerns.
Yeah.
Over some of the things that may be at odds with their identities and their beliefs. So I guess my thought is 110% have we had marginalized communities as part of our school district, and that needs to change. We need to see all of our students, but we need to not create a new set of marginalized students who also don't feel heard in the meantime. So I guess that's what I'm trying to speak to, if that makes sense.
Along that lines, so this slide says we will not remain silent and will actively speak out and address injustices, dismantle structures. So my first question is, who is we?
Yeah.
Are we talking as a district? Or is the we, to your point, there are going to be people who in some of those communities are not going to want to be heard or speak out or address, or, you know what I mean? So I guess my fear this is a pretty bold statement for me to say that, you know, I mean, when I first read that, I was like, oh, we're going to teach kids how to go be activists, you know? But like, that's a pretty bold statement, irregardless of what you're talking about. Just to say that we're not going to remain silent, we will actively speak out and address injustices. I don't know if that oversteps what our position is as a school district. Like do you know what I mean? Like I can appreciate that we want everyone to be seen, and I can appreciate that kids should be able to feel confident speaking out should they choose to. But making a statement that says we will not remain silent and we will actively do this, is that a lawyer thing too, Maureen? is it, what kind of,
Well, how do you quantify what, this is a hard issue, and this is, again, what they've struggled with. I'm assuming, here's the thing. When I look at a committee that creates this and all the passion, and I am so grateful for all of this, I also know that people that choose to be part of a committee like this are part of this committee because they will naturally want to speak out and address things. And this is why they've selected to be on a committee, or like all of us here have selected to be in this position where we get to create a vision for education in our community. But to me, marginalized identities also is the people that aren't going to do that.
But-
That
Oh, I'm sorry.
I almost would say, we will create a structure that ensures inclusive and equitable school communities for people of all identities.
yeah.
I mean, again, I'm only one person, but that to me is a really bold statement.
I think the statement is based on the district and not the individual who is speaking out.
Right, but as a
So-
district, I don't think that's our place.
But I think, let me give an example. If a marginalized, and I'm not, please, Faith, jump in if I'm speaking out of turn, but this is how I interpret this. If a specific group is feeling marginalized, is it the responsibility, I'm asking the question this way, will it be the responsibility of the district to ensure that we are speaking out and addressing the injustice and dismantling the structures that lead to those inequities? And because this statement is a district statement, not an individual or student or any.
Right.
So the answer would be yes, it's our
Yes.
responsibility to do that. And even to your point, all of the groups that may feel marginalized because of this, they're now included in this statement, and we would have to make sure that we are doing the exact same thing for any group that would feel marginalized. But I think from what I heard on the call is that this statement was put on because there are groups that feel unseen, and so you have to put this out there, and there are a lot of students that feel unseen because they've experienced from the district, from students, and from the staff, and so now they want to ensure that those who are in power will not allow this to happen in the future.
I would just feel more comfortable if it said we would be able to.
But
Not remain
that's coming from the individual's perspective and not from the district's perspective.
Right, I mean, I hear
Can
what
you
you're saying,
say,
and I appreciate it. I just,
Sorry, can you say the whole sentence of what you,
what did I
I
just
missed
say?
it, sorry.
They would be able to speak out.
Yeah, just I'm still struggling with who we is.
The
And I
we's.
understand where you're coming from, like, I have a different perspective of it now hearing you. But I have some concerns. Maybe we will be able to actively speak out, not remain silent. I think actively speaking out and not remaining silent would be actively speaking out to address injustices, dismantle structures that lead to inequities.
So do I hear you saying, Ally, that we will actively speak out and address injustices?
Well, I think we would be able to. I don't,
Without
like,
remaining silent, it's the not remain silent that
I just,
pieces.
I think that you should have the opportunity to do it, should you choose to do it.
But that's again from.
Well, if I could just point out, when you look at the 9 statements, all but this one and the racism one are "we will" statements. All the others are "we will" statements. And I think it would make sense to make them all "we will" statements.
Yes.
And so I think it's appropriate to define who is the "we," and then perhaps go from there on these 2 slides.
Well, I mean, this is coming from the board. The board had the opportunity to write this statement. They punted it to the committee, and so we're finalizing it here. But this is a statement saying we as the Board of Education will support this for the district. And so I think that's something that we have to be very cognizant of. This group of people came together and did all of this work, hours and hours of this work. And again, it started with the prior board, but that's what it came down to. This is what they distilled and said was important. So if, Ally, if you can't support it, I totally understand that, but this is the statement that they worked on and
Well, the
Right.
previous board,
But is it the board?
no.
Like, I thought.
This came from
I thought it
committee.
was to represent the whole
We
district.
didn't, I
So
don't
if
think
we
the
are
board ever
having this
discussed
confusion-
creating equity statements, to be
No.
honest with you.
This
What
is-
we had planned and decided last year was to create a board advisory role for equity committee, to advise, and actually from what I understand from our board agreements was that we had created this committee in order to review topics we're working on as a board and provide an equity lens to those topics. There was never a discussion about creating equity statements. My understanding was that was solely the will of the committee at the time.
well,
So,
what is the committee doing the work for?
well, I guess for now, for this board, but this wasn't something that had been begun at the board level. This was brought up from the committee as the committee's desire to have the board look at this, not anything else.
Let me,
And so now, but if
So,
if these are our
can I
statements?
finish?
Yeah.
My thought on this would be that part of the language, one, Jen, I think I hear you saying that you think that the "we" reflects the board. And I've heard from some other people that it reflects the district. Are you saying that it's the board as part of the district?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
that's what I wanted to clarify.
Yes.
One, that was the one thing. So the "we will," I think the standardization of language, I agree with Maureen on that. The "we will" statement, I like the concept that it's consistent from statement to statement.
Yes,
because
continuity.
each of them is equally important. I do feel that we could probably address the topic and kind of take out some of the subjective nature, because all of these are subjective. Let's be honest, the 7 people that sit on this board do not have the ability to know every single action of every single staff member or student to each other. We direct the vision. And so maybe what we say is, we will just take out the "will not remain silent and will actively speak out," and just say, we will address injustices, we will dismantle structures that lead to inequities, and we will work to educate and change behaviors. Maybe we just take out the "remain silent and actively speak," since that seems to be an area, and maybe I'm missing something very important on why that needs to be there, and completely allow for that. But to me, it seems like if we take that portion out, it is more consistent, and it more, at a board level, speaks to the vision that we're trying to create. And obviously, if we're addressing injustices, it might be by speaking, it might be by doing, it might be by many other things, but we don't necessarily need to state that, because that is inherent in addressing the injustices. That's the mechanism by which we will address the injustices.
The mechanism is what? Tell me again,
The mechanism would be not remaining silent and actively speaking out. That's how you address injustices.
Okay.
One of the ways.
So I would think that our role would be to govern and make policy
Right.
that is consistent
Yes.
with these statements, right? Because we are leading the district.
Right.
So we want to make sure that the decisions that we're making are seen through an equity lens, so that we are consistent with what these statements say.
Yeah, that's what, Latanya, that's what I'm asking. I'm asking for you to share with me, since you've been there, does the statement "not remain silent and will actively speak out," and that portion of the statement, does that need to be in that statement for that statement to be?
I think whoever the "we" is needs to
Well, the
do-
we should probably know who the we are the "we."
Okay, so we are "we." So
we are
if
"we."
Then are we saying that we govern and make policies?
Yeah, I think that's.
We will
govern and make policy to address
I see, you're saying add
injustices,
that?
dismantle structures.
We will create.
What is the point, what is
Wait.
dismantle structures? Like, are you,
Like the status quo, like
so we want to,
whatever the status quo is, like if it's,
So a structure is the status quo.
yeah, something that is resulting in inequities, policies, practices as, procedures, things that are happening in the school buildings, or even at this level that are resulting in inequities for our students.
Recruitment, retention.
Yes,
any-
all
anything.
of it.
Totally get it, just trying to make sure where we're falling on the line of creating policy versus process
Yeah,
and
but the
making
we
sure.
is, I'm sorry, but
So-
the we is not just the board. The we, I would think, is everyone. in the
Yeah,
district.
that's, okay.
Yeah.
That's what I think I was hearing, so I'm just making sure that everyone is clear, including mostly me.
so, can I ask this? So
Yeah.
where we say work to educate and change behaviors to ensure an inclusive and an equitable school community, isn't the dismantling structures that lead to those, I mean, isn't that what that is? So when you work to educate and change behaviors to ensure an inclusive and equitable school community, don't you do that by dismantling structures?
So the goal is, okay.
Well,
I don't want to spend 1,000 hours myself on this, so I apologize. I don't want to belabor. Can I try this? We will acknowledge the existence of biases and inequities of marginalized identities in our schools and community. We will address injustices and work to educate and prioritize work to educate and change behaviors, addressing injustices to ensure an inclusive and equitable school community for all people and all identities. I feel like it just rearranged everything that was on there, so I don't know if it matters.
I took a little bit of what you were saying. So if we went with, we will acknowledge the existence of all that is the same, schools and community. And then we will address injustices that lead to inequities and work to educate and change behaviors to ensure an inclusive and equitable school community for people of all identities.
Yeah, let me ask this to Maureen though, because I think like where are we at with we acknowledge the existence in our schools and community?
Well, if you say we will, that is saying where we see it, we will acknowledge it and address it.
Yes.
That's good.
Okay.
That's better than just saying we acknowledge the existence
Yes.
right now.
So we will, okay.
We will acknowledge, okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think as long as it says we will acknowledge, because
Yeah.
I was having some exception with taking out actively speak. And I guess the subjective nature is how will we acknowledge it? But that's something
Yeah.
we can put in a policy or procedure later. But I think
Well, I don't want to take something out that is meaningful.
speaking out is meaningful, but I think we will acknowledge is the same as speaking out. But how will you acknowledge it is the question.
Does this go back to the committee?
Right, and the training and the things that, I think led to a little bit of the statement here is that we really want to have our administrators, and I'll even throw myself under the bus, being more comfortable to there's 9 out of 10 people in this room that feel good about this. And I have concerns to go ahead and say, let's think about all students right now and to have those crucial conversations and to have that even when it might cause more change, it might cause a little bit of being, oh, this was almost done and we need to go back and do this. But to have that stance of we need to have those difficult conversations. We need to be comfortable with, wrestling with our own thoughts and reflections and maybe even, learned behaviors that have been there for a long time and being able to say, let's talk about this. And a lot of that is the foundation of relationships and trust that makes all of that happen. But I think the group felt strongly that we need to enable more people to tell their stories and to listen to stories, and then to possibly change our practices based on that conversation and the learning that happens.
So I 100% agree with that. So where I was coming at this from was there was a certain book that was read in a 4th grade classroom that was, in my opinion, more of a middle school text, and it did not address equity. It addressed one side of a story, and I guess my concern with the way that was written, like I like the way that it's worded now, but I would also maybe educate our staff that, like, while those conversations are extremely important, they're also, you know, a lot of times based on the kids' ability to empathize and, you know, what they can actually think about.
Right.
And also extremely important is showing both sides.
Right.
Right, to every story, no matter what the story is. So I guess when I first looked at that, was the first thing that popped into my head. So I guess another piece of this that we didn't really address in here is, I mean, training of staff is kind of in here, but I would maybe ensure that when these conversations are happening, that they're seeing it from not just my side and your side, but what about, you know, so-and-so side?
And how are we choosing the committees to form these trainings? And, you know, how do we hear word of a direction to our administration to include like what Ally is saying?
I want to make sure
and to
that.
include what LaTanya is saying, and to
Right.
include what we are all as a group deciding that we want for the vision for this district. When it relates to equity. And I think that I fall at going back to the language of we prioritize recruitment, selection, retention. I would fall toward that sort of language rather than dictating what should be taught specifically to teachers, because I feel that that's our administrator's role. But ours is more to say that as a district we prioritize. But I don't.
I think that the older the kids get, the more able they are to see, you know,
Right.
both the light and the dark, if you will. Like, here's, you know, one perspective, here's the opposite perspective, and neither one of them is wrong.
No, they're just
They
different.
just each have their own perspective. But you know, again, I would be careful because you can't really do that with a 9-year-old in every instance.
Well, sometimes.
So at this point, are we,
Yeah.
I was gonna say-
are we saying
Yeah.
we want to wordsmith this ourselves? Are we saying we want to kick this back to the committee?
I think I'd like to have Maureen
where's-
take a quick pass at this with Faith. If maybe the two of you could work together on this one, because Faith has taken a lot of good notes, and Maureen, you've got a little bit there to make sure that we're talking about what we're going to be doing as a priority. Would that be something that would make sense to have you guys work with?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And I do want to acknowledge how much time and effort
Definitely.
the committee put
Definitely.
into this. I mean, I was also on those calls, and, you know,
Can we have-
we're here jumping in after the
Yeah.
fact, and I do feel a little bit badly about that because they spent so much time and really excruciatingly going through every word. But we do have to make sure that it feels right for the board, for the school, and the community, so.
I would be interested to hear what they said after the wordsmithing, though. Or not,
Oh, after.
I don't, I mean. yeah.
After we wordsmith, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I just
I think it would be, I think,
I think it'd be
where
valuable.
yeah, because like I was saying in here, I don't necessarily know where something that I think, we better not risk it, so to speak, is actually the key point of it. I don't know that. This is not my area of expertise.
Well, I'm sure that's, you know, that's a piece of it, is not dancing around the subject and
Right.
being direct. But I agree, let's let Faith and Maureen work on this, and then we can take a look at it again as a board, and then decide if we're ready to vote on it.
I think we should also let the committee see it right before we vote on it. Because otherwise we may lose the spirit of why it was done.
Maybe have it for information and then have it go to the committee for a pass-through and see,
Yeah,
and then come back.
Can I also, Maureen, when
Yeah,
you guys
sounds
talk
good.
about
Because
it?
this is a big deal. I don't want to rush through it.
exactly.
Yeah, but they don't
exactly.
work they don't meet during the summer, correct?
They do not.
They
So
might.
this process it would take us through September.
Yeah.
Can I ask, Maureen, when you guys take a look at it, just in terms of adding policies, can we just add our own policies? Do they have to be approved by, I mean, you know, are we talking about the ISBE type stuff? Are there some new ones that come down to address this?
Well, you already have policies, 5.20, 7.20, the equal employment, the equal educational opportunities.
So we're just talking about tweaking our policies, not creating brand new
I
ones?
think it's just more of a vision statement,
Yeah.
I think.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just wanted to make
I
sure.
don't know, maybe
Yeah.
I'm missing it, but I think
Yeah.
that that's what,
It would become a guide, not just a vision statement, but
Yeah.
it would become the guide
The
for
guide
which we
for
make
how we-
future
Yeah, I think the
policy.
next
Yeah.
steps would be, once we have something that we approve, to bring that into Envision 308 and what those strategic goals are and how you weave equity and these statements into our long-term goals.
becomes
Can
our
we
lens.
send those
That makes
out to the
sense.
board? Can we send out all of our current, what we have, just in terms of policies? Just kind of where we're at, or just the numbers of them, we can look them up ourselves.
Policies
For
around
which
special-
policies
just-
would be
just-
affected? Is that what you
Well, I
mean, Ally?
More to the point of where are our diversity and equity policies right now?
But I think this
Well,
becomes
but
a lens
that-
for every policy.
Yeah.
Special
Like, I can think of an
education, English
example,
learners,
and I don't
all
know
of those.
what your policy on this looks like, but just, I was working today on dress code and hair discrimination.
right.
And if you have a dress code and grooming policy that says students must have hair looking like this or that cannot look like this, that's a policy that, looking through this lens, could be problematic.
Yes.
Right? So so you
Well,
would
and the
have to
enforcement.
reconsider that potentially.
Yeah.
So you're right, it could be any and all policies.
Yeah, I don't know that we could easily identify.
So
So,
that would probably
okay.
be the next work of the equity committee, would be to
With
look
the
through some
policy committee.
policies somehow, I don't know. But
Yeah.
it seems like that would have to fall next.
So
Yeah.
we will, we'll tweak the wording, we'll bring it back to the board, get the board's approval, we'll take it back to the committee, get their approval, and then we'll bring it back to the board for final approval.
Yes.
Yep,
Okay,
yep.
sounds
Okay.
good?
Yep.
All right.
So shall we move on to
We've
17?
taken good notes, so I think we've heard where the board's coming
Listen,
from,
I
and
hear
we'll be
we
able to.
record these things.
That's true too, that's true too, Lori.
Thank you, Ursula.
Okay. So,
All right, item 7.5 is in regards to graduation requirements. So the following information was presented to the Teaching and Learning Board Advisory Committee and is now being brought to the board as information. Tonight we have our Executive Director of Accountability in High School Education, Heather Kincaid, and the Oswego High School Principal, Mr. Chris Grays, here to present. So Heather, Chris, thank you for being here tonight, and the floor is now yours.
Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Sparlin. So I'll start us off. So we met as a committee to propose some high school graduation requirement changes that will go into effect for the freshman class of 2026. So that will be the 8th graders that will be starting next school year. So it won't impact any current high school students, but it will impact the class of 2026. That's a pretty futuristic date, if I can say so myself there. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the actual committee members. So the committee membership. So we thought it was very important to include a variety of different stakeholders in this committee here. So we included teachers from a variety of different subject areas, including special education, English language learners. We also included department chairs, members from student services, building administration assistant principals, and then also Mrs. Kincaid as well from the district office lens. So thought it was important to get the perspective of a variety of different areas, and the committee did a great job. So I'll start off by talking about our current graduation requirements. And as I'm talking about our current graduation requirements, I'll be sure to distinguish between our SD308 graduation requirements and state graduation requirements. So, of course, all of our SD308 graduation requirements encompass the state graduation requirements, but we have some additional graduation requirements. So as we hit those additional ones, I'll make sure to differentiate so you guys can have that for your knowledge. So as far as English, we require 4 credits in English. 2 of those credits have to be in writing intensive courses. Math, 3 credits. 1 of those credits must be in algebra. 1 of those credits must be include geometry content. So in science and social studies, the actual state graduation requirement is 2.0. However, ours is 2.5 for both of those. The reason for our social studies is because the civics was added, and so we incorporate the civics graduation requirement, which is a state graduation requirement, into our social studies graduation requirement. And so going back up to science there, one credit must be a biological science and 1 credit must be a physical science. And then when we go into physical education, that's actually an enrollment requirement. So students have to be enrolled in a physical education course each semester that they're in school. So it's not a graduation requirement, it's an enrollment requirement, if that makes sense. All right, now as far as driver's education, half a credit in driver's education is one of our current graduation requirements. Half a credit in health is also a current graduation requirement. Half a credit of consumer education is also a graduation requirement. Now, when we go to our core selective and open electives, these are School District 308 graduation requirements. The only difference is in our selective electives graduation requirement, it does encompass a state graduation requirement that's 1 year of a career technical education, fine arts, and world language designation. So that's encompassing 1 credit of the state's graduation requirement, but other than that, the rest of those, the 1.5 course credits for core electives, the additional 1 for selective electives, and the 1.5 for open electives are all SD308 graduation requirements. The total required credits to graduate is 22, and as you see in the notes in the categories, you can see the electives, for the core, the selective, and the open electives. You'll see exactly what those encompass. So these are our current graduation requirements, and Mrs. Kincaid is going to go over our proposed recommendations for the class of 2026.
So as we start to look at what possible changes we can make, a new public act for this year, we wanted to share these 3 elements from that information. So first of all, starting with 2023, our students need to earn 1 credit in intensive instruction in computer literacy. Now, the key thing with this requirement, though, is it's similar to the writing intensive courses under the English credits. So this does not have to be an additional credit, so we are not looking to increase our graduation requirements. What we will be doing is curriculum review, where we will be embedding these standards within courses. So the committee had discussed the curriculum rewrite of our modern world, so our social studies for freshmen, and then potentially infusing some of the computer literacy into freshman math and freshman science. The next 2 are actually things that we are already doing here in SD308. So by 23-24, all students have the opportunity to take at least 1 computer science course. We already offer a variety of computer science-based courses with Computer Programming 1 and 2, AP Computer Science Principles, and AP Computer Science. They are open to students in grades 9 through 12, and many of those courses do not have a prerequisite. So it's truly open courses. The last one, starting with 24-25, students currently are required to take 2 years of science by the state of Illinois. The change is it would be 2 years of laboratory science. Our sciences that create our 2 credits of science are already all lab sciences, so we have already met these 2 requirements. So what we are looking at for proposed changes. As Chris had mentioned, there is no change for English. We currently require 4 years. The state requires 4 years, 2 of which must be writing intensive. As he also mentioned, the state requires 3 years of math. We require 3 years of math. There is no recommendation for change in math. So what we are recommending, as Chris mentioned, we currently require 1 credit must be in biology and 1 credit must be in physical science. So we're looking to bring some flexibility for our students. Currently, science is aligned to the NGSS standards, of which the 3 domains of NGSS is biological science, earth and space science, and physical science. So instead of 1 credit in biology and 1 credit in physical science, we would like to propose that 2 credits be in 2 of those 3 domains. So it gives the students the opportunity and flexibility to do 1 year in bio or 1 year in earth, 1 year of earth or 1 year of physical. So again, we're not looking to change the number of science credits, we're just looking to provide some flexibility for our students. Social studies will remain the same. We are looking though at some curricular revisions throughout next year to start for the fall of 2022. Physical education would not change, as Chris mentioned. It is an enrollment requirement, so that would remain the same. What you can see is missing though is driver's education. So we would no longer require a student to pass driver's ed in order to graduate. We would still offer driver's ed as an elective. It would become part of the student's GPA just like any other elective, but we are recommending that removal as a graduation requirement. Health and consumer ed stays the same. They are required by the state of Illinois. And then our last area of restructuring would be electives. When we met as a committee, what we heard from both our core and our elective departments is that by the kind of tri-level of electives that we currently have, it restricts some students. We have some students that want to take all of their electives in the music and arts. We have some students who want to write on the yearbook, participate in the newspaper, or take creative writing, and all of their courses are in effect in core departments. So what we are looking, with the exception of the 1 credit that Mr. Graves mentioned that is required by the state of Illinois in CTE, Fine Arts, and World Language, is that we would then take our remaining electives and just tag them as electives. So it would really be students' choice in order to align their elective choices with their college and career pathways. So we believe that kind of restructuring our electives will give our students more flexibility as they think about and plan for their future. We are not looking to change the total number of graduation requirements. So in summary, these are the main areas that we are proposing changes to our current graduation requirements. And as Chris had mentioned, this does not impact any current student in high school, so nobody needs to hurry and make any changes. The reason why we're looking for our incoming class of 2026 is because we select our classes in the fall. So our current rising freshmen have already selected all of their courses. So we want to make sure that our graduation requirements, any change is approved, made, publicized prior to course selection, which happens in November and December primarily. So the 4 main areas that we're looking at is science. So again, the flexibility to earn your 1 credit in 2 of the 3 domains, biological science, physical science, or earth science. No change to the overall number of credits. The removal of driver's education as a graduation requirement. Again, we will still offer any student can take driver's ed as an elective, and it would be counted as the student part of the student's GPA. And then our electives. We do have to retain the 1 credit of CTE, Fine Arts, and World Language because that is a state requirement, but the remaining electives would then be student choice within any department that we offer. And then just the computer literacy, that will be something that we will be working on throughout the next year to put in place in fall of 22.
Sorry.
At that point, that is the end of our recommendations for graduation requirements.
Heather, Chris, thank you very much. Very well done. Does the board have any questions in regards to the changes or the summary of changes that we are proposing?
Yeah, I just have a question. So regarding driver's ed, currently, do students get any benefits, like fee waivers or anything like that because it is a graduation requirement? Are there students who are eligible for fee waivers or anything like that currently?
So students would be eligible for fee waivers regardless if it's required for graduation or not.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Along those lines, what type is that going to be just straight elective credit, or will they count that towards PE?
no, we do, so in order to count driver's ed as a PE credit, you have to have a waiver with the state. We do not have a state waiver regarding driver's ed, so it would be just a straight elective. It would not count as a kinetic wellness. The only, as you could see for kinetic wellness, it was 3.5. The only other thing that we kind of put in the physical education umbrella that counts as the enrollment requirement is health. So a student is enrolled in either health or a physical education course.
All right, and then another just clarifying question. So biology would be obviously biology, chemistry and physics would be physical science?
Physical science.
Just to clarify, because I know
Yep.
there's some people out there who didn't want to take chemistry. And then it's an 8-period day at the high school, right?
Correct.
So then I guess my only point of reference for parents, because we do have kids who struggle across all kinds of buildings all over the state, is you can take 6 classes, right?
Correct.
With lunch and a study hall?
Yep.
And as long as you're passing all those classes, you can still get early release or late start your senior year.
Absolutely.
Because I know that matters to people.
Up 6 times 4, 24.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you only need 22, so I appreciate you.
Yeah, I wanted to echo that. I've had a lot of experience with other districts where we work on graduation requirements, and I think this group really took seriously amplifying student voice and giving students and families selections to make the right choices for them. And I really want to commend everybody and Heather's leadership on this.
Thank you, Heather.
Yeah, I think
Thank
it's a
you for
great
not-
improvement. I think it's a really great improvement. I wish it was starting next year. Thank you.
I don't want to, I also appreciate greatly what you're doing. I have one concern that has remained for me, in that consumer education doesn't really encompass anything related to financial literacy. And as we know, financial literacy is pretty much a determining factor for how people can live if they know how money works. Has there been any discussion surrounding why we don't do more with financial literacy? I know that that's not covered well enough in consumer education, which is a state required course.
Yes.
Can you share more?
Yep, actually, our CTE departments were working recently with First Allied Bank. They have provided us additional supplemental materials, primarily focused on financial literacy for next year. So the 2 high schools have been working together to incorporate additional financial literacy. That's also part of our SD308 goals and objectives. So that is something that has been discussed over the last couple months of building the experiences and the information that students will have access to.
Into what? Building it into what?
Into the curriculum for our consumer education course.
So what will you lose from consumer education if you put that in?
To be honest, I would have to go back and look.
Okay, so my concern is that we have so many different 5.5 credits for electives out of the 22 required graduation credits. Why are we not having a half a credit on financial literacy separate from that? And that's one. And two, I do get concerned when an institution that's a sponsor of the community would be providing the literature for our students when there is so much free literature that's available that's non-biased or in no way, shape, or form looks like it's promoting one particular company or another. So if the Allied First Bank is providing the financial literacy documentation, that's great for Allied First Bank. That's now all over all that. But how is that great for us?
So it's a separate curriculum, and it was reviewed by both high schools. So it's not created by them. It was just a resource that was funded and provided to our students.
And while it's not graduation requirements, part of the new Illinois Social Studies standards is key to financial literacy, and I know we have been putting that off for budget cuts and for other reasons, but financial literacy standards are now in elementary and junior high at the state level, and part of our work next year is to incorporate that into social studies curriculum prior to the consumer education class on a regular basis on those understandings.
I would argue too, it doesn't have to be just consumer ed. Like when we do our roller coaster project, we give them salaries and they have to pay for their materials.
But there's nothing, yes,
keep
that
track of
happens
it.
in your
Yeah.
class, and it happens in a lot of classes, but it's not a formal program, and that tells them about salaries. That doesn't tell them about the entirety of what you need to do with money in your life. So if we're trying to prepare students for success past high school, with whatever kind of role they have, either in the career, technical arena, in the military, in college, whichever, we've done them a disservice, in my opinion, if we haven't taught them how money works. And I don't think that it's consistently, it is done piecemeal, but I was more looking for what Faith was saying, which is that it's becoming part of our curriculum in somebody's responsibility. It's not just, yeah, we kind of do that in physics. No, this is part of social studies and what that means for our students. Thank you.
All right, anything else? Excellent.
All right, so.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Can I get a motion for item 8.1, approval of bills for payment?
I make a motion to authorize the payment of bills in the amount of $3,231,147.11 as presented.
Second.
Dr. Marino,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Simulton.
Aye.
Motion passes.
6-0.
Sorry, 6-0. Do I have to ask for a motion for 8.2? Is that, okay. Can I get a motion for 8.2, approval of 21-22 Board of Education meeting calendar, dates and times?
I make a motion to approve the 2021-22 Board of Education meeting calendar as discussed and presented.
Second.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Mrs. Simulton,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson,
Aye.
Dr. Marino.
Aye. Motion passes 6-0. Can I get a motion for 8.3, approval of resolution and request for release of Kendall County land cash funds?
I make a motion to approve a resolution and request for the release of Kendall County land cash funds to Oswego Community Unit School District 308 in the amount of $13,427.13.
Second.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Mrs. Simulton,
Aye.
Dr. Marino,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. Can I get a motion for 8.4, approval of students' rights and responsibilities section in student handbook?
I make a motion to approve the student rights and responsibilities section in the student handbook as presented.
Second.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson,
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Dr. Marino,
Aye.
Mrs. Simulton.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. Okay, 8.5, right? Okay, can I get a motion to pass, can I get a motion for 8.5, approval for Boulder Hill and Long Beach school-wide Title I plan?
I make a motion to approve the Boulder Hill and Long Beach school-wide Title I plan as presented.
Second.
Oh, look at you.
Mrs. Johnson,
Aye.
Dr. Marino,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Simulton.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. 8.6, can I get a motion for approval of building administrator contracts?
I make a motion to approve the building administrator contracts as presented.
Second.
Mrs. Simulton,
Aye.
Dr. Marino,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
No.
Mrs. Doyle,
No?
Mrs. Johnson.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-2. 8.7, can I get a motion for approval of district administrator contract?
I make a motion to approve the district administrator contract as presented.
Second.
Second.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson,
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Dr. Marino,
Aye.
Mrs. Simulton.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. 8.8, can I get a motion for the approval of personnel report?
I make a motion to approve the personnel report as presented.
Second. Gotcha.
Mrs. Johnson,
Aye.
Dr. Marino,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Simulton.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. 8.9, can I get a motion for the approval of the negotiated agreement between Community Unit School District 308 and the Oswego Educational Support Professional Association?
Second.
I make a motion to approve the negotiated agreement between Community
Sorry.
Unit School District 308 and Oswego Educational Support Professional Association.
Second.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
No.
Mrs. Simulton,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson,
Aye.
Dr. Marino.
Aye. Motion passes 5-1. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Well, do you want to go into closed session?
Oh, we're going back into closed
Oh,
session.
yes, we are going. So a motion to return to closed session?
I make a motion to enter closed session under statute 5 ILCS 122 C10, the placement of individual students in special education programs and other matters relating to individual students.
I second.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson,
Aye.
Mrs. Simulton,
Aye.
Dr. Marino,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson.
Yeah.
What did you say, Ally? What did you say?
I wanted to say no.
Okay. So we'll